Good afternoon, everyone, here in Mountain View and the 8 or so offices that are here by VC. It is our pleasure this afternoon to welcome Jim Kouzes to speak as part of our Leading at Google speaker series. You can see all of the Leading at Google talks by just searching for Leading at Google at YouTube, and we've had about 10 of them at this point. Jim is a co-author with Barry Posner of The Leadership Challenge, which is one of the best-selling leadership books ever, over 1.5 million copies sold. And in my role at leadership development here, Googlers often come up and ask me, what's the one book you would recommend? We're busy. What's the one book you would recommend where I could learn more about leadership and also how to improve my skills in this area? And this is the one that I always recommend. So I am overjoyed that Jim's decided to join us today. I've been using this book, The Leadership Challenge, in my professional career and personally since 1996, when the first edition came out. And some of you were lucky enough today to receive the fourth edition, which came out in 2007. Despite those number of years in between, in 2007, Amazon editors voted this as the #3 business book of the year. So pretty exciting that it's still doing so well after a period of time. We like it at Google, by the way, because it's research-based, and Jim will talk a little bit about that. A little bit about Jim. He grew up in Washington, D.C., but has been a Northern California resident for over 30 years now. He's the Dean's Executive Professor of Leadership at the Levy School of Business at Santa Clara University. He's also an experienced executive. He served as president, then CEO, and chairman of the Tom Peters Company from 1988 until 2000. So experienced both working in this field as an educator and researcher, and also actually doing the role as a leader, and he'll talk more about that. He received several awards. I'll name two. The International Management Council honored Jim as the 2001 recipient of their prestigious Wilbur M. McFeely Award for outstanding contributions to management and leadership education. And in 2006, Jim was presented with the Golden Gavel, which is the highest honor awarded by Toastmasters International, which some of you know about. But since you're here to listen to Jim, not me, without further intro, I will turn it over to Jim Kouzes. Please help me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I have to tell you a story. When I first started doing this particular work, it was in 1969. I came back from the Peace Corps, 2 years in Turkey, 67 to 69, and I got back to the United States, and I needed to do something to earn some money. And so I wanted to do something continuing to be of service, and I found a job in community action programs, and I got hired into training. An organization called Community Action Program Training Institute, and I went around the country from out of Austin, Texas, in the South and the Southwest, doing management training programs for young managers and leaders in community action agencies, mental health agencies, social service agencies throughout the Southwest United States. So one day, we arrive in a small town in East Texas. Anyone in this room ever been to East Texas? Few of you have been to East Texas. For those of you who haven't, it's the green part of Texas, right near Arkansas. So we were there, and we went to the training venue, which happened to be a local church. Now, if you're in East Texas, near Arkansas, the denomination of this church is likely to be what? What would you guess? Baptist. It was, in fact, a black Southern Baptist church. So here we were in East Texas, and in this church, we were looking for the venue. Where will we have the training? And I thought community center or classroom or something. And the person who was responsible said, no, it's in the sanctuary. So we walked into the sanctuary, and I looked around for, well, we didn't have PowerPoint or anything like that in those days. No laptops, no mobile phones. It was, a flip chart and some markers. I looked for that. There was nothing. I said, where do I stand to conduct the training? And the person said, at the pulpit. So I walked up to the pulpit of this Black Southern Baptist Church in East Texas, and I started to train. Now, I was about 3 minutes into my training when something happened. What do you think happened? I would say something and people would, they would say amen or hallelujah or and a praise the Lord. Exactly. Preach on, all those things. So if at any time this afternoon for the next 50 minutes you feel so moved, just go right ahead. So good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It'll be a good afternoon. I have an interactive style, so I'm going to be addressing some key lessons from we started doing our research, Barry and I, in the early 80s, 1981, in fact. So for the last 26, 27 years, addressing some key lessons from that and how they apply to you here at Google and to all those who might be watching on YouTube. But before I start, let me tell you a story. One of the people we had the opportunity to work with was the CEO of Northrop Grumman, Ron Sugar. And we were doing some classroom work with him and his executive team, and Ron would walk into the room, and there was a piano in the corner, and he would sit down at the piano and he would start to play. He wouldn't say a thing to the group, and he would just start to play, and then he would turn around on the bench at the piano and he'd say to the group, "Now, why do you think I started by playing the piano?" People would guess, not quite sure why the CEO would begin by playing the piano. And then he would say to them, "Well, to me, leadership is personal. Do the people you lead know who you are? Do they know what you stand for and believe in, what you care about, and why they ought to be following you?" So I want to try to answer the question as best I can in the brief time we have together, why people ought to be following you, me, or anyone. And in order to do that, I've got a few outcomes. As a result of this time together, you'll be able to name the leaders who have the most influence and impact on you. You'll be able to describe the one attribute that's the foundation of leadership and identify the one practice that is the one that has the most positive impact on other people's behavior, and name the one quality that differentiates leaders from other individuals, particularly individual contributors. You'll also be able to identify the practice that's the toughest for leaders to learn, discuss how positive a leader needs to be, discuss and describe what it takes to become the best leader you can be, and finally, if you stay till the very end and don't leave, I'll tell you the secret to success in life. Does that sound like a useful way to spend the next 45 minutes?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Quick learner. All right. Let me take on the first one. Who are the most influential leaders? Here's a list of possibilities. These are categories, not individuals, but you might be thinking about an individual and how this applies to you. If you were to take this category, these categories up here, from business leader through none, and select the one category from which your most influential leader role model comes, what category would it be in? Would it be business leader, community leader, entertainer, and so on? So here's what I'm going to do quickly. I'll name the category. Let's just do a quick show of hands in the room just to get a sense of this group and see how it works. The one category from which your most influential leader role model comes. How about business leader? Get 1, 2, 3, about 4 hands go up, 5 hands. How about community leader? Somebody who's a civic leader, a community action activist, somebody like that, about 4 hands are up. How about entertainer? 1 hand. Family member. How about a family member? Boy, that looks like maybe 20 to 30 hands. How about a political leader? Someone in politics. About, again, 5 or 6 hands. Professional athlete. 2 go up. And then teacher or coach. Probably about 15 or so. So if I got this right, the most hands went up for family member, the second most for teacher, coach, and then after that, it was probably political leader and community leader, something like that. Would that be about right, what you saw in the room? Well, let's take a look at what other people told us right, when we collected this data. Here's what it looks like. Business leader, 7%, community leader, 11%, entertainer, 2%, family member, 40%, political leader, 4%, professional athlete, 3%, teacher, coach, 26%, and none, 7%. Now, look at just the top vote getters, which would be first, family member, similar to this group, second, teacher or coach, 26%, and then civic leader, community leader, somebody who is out there in the community as an activist leading. That's 76% of the most influential role models come from those categories. And yet when you think about leadership or read about leadership, who is promoted, at least in the business world, as the leader we should model our behavior after? The business leader category, right? or potentially maybe a political leader or a military leader. But rarely do people say, my mother or my father. When we're studying leadership inside organizations, do we read case studies about your parents? Do we read case studies about your teacher or a coach? Do we read case studies about somebody in the community? Typically, we don't. We pay attention to the behavior of business leaders. But in fact, if you look at the data, most leaders that had the most impact on us come from categories other than those that we frequently look at in the people that make the headlines. As influential as Barack Obama is currently on public policy, on a day-to-day basis, he is not the most influential person in your life or my life. Eric Schmidt, as influential as he is at Google, is not the most influential person day-to-day on your behavior. So as you look at these three categories, what do they have in common? Family member, teacher, coach, community leader. They're personal. You know them, they know you. In fact, what this data tells us is very simple. The leaders who have the most influence on our day-to-day behavior are those who are closest to us. That means inside organizations or outside organizations, the people that are going to influence us more than anyone else are those individuals. If it's a manager we report to, our most immediate manager, or if it's someone we're working with on a project who's a team leader or a project leader, or if it's an informal leader who has a good idea that other people wish to follow, it's that person that has the most influence. That means in this room right now, the most important and influential leader is you. Because each and every one of us has the capacity to influence those people who are closest to us with a good idea, with our behavior, by setting a good example. And so this data suggests to us that we need to get out of the box that puts leadership in the category of something that only managers do or people with titles do, and think more like we do at Google, which is that leadership is everyone's business. It's not the private reserve of a few charismatic men and women. It's not something that comes with a title. So, how do we become the best leaders we can be? This is the short answer to this question: learning. What Barry Posner and I found in our research, along with Lillis Brown from University of Saskatchewan in Canada, is that the leaders who learn more and are engaged in more learning more frequently become the best leaders. Now, that's no surprise to anyone in this room, is it? The more you practice, the better you'll be at anything. So just a wild guess. How many hours of practice does it take on a daily basis over how many years to become the best you can be? At anything. Anybody want to take a guess? 10,000 hours. 10 years, 10,000 hours to get to a championship level, to get to a level of performance like Lang Lang is as a pianist, or someone who is highly capable at a sport, or at engineering, or at music, or at art, or anything in which they engage. A guy named Kay Anders Erickson at Florida State University has been doing research on this for years, and through all of the research they've done, found that basically we have to practice 10,000 hours over a 10-year period of time, and there is no fast track to it. You can't cut the time down to 5 years by practicing more hours a day. When I had a chance to have a conversation with Lang Lang, my wife Tay and I were attending a concert. We went to a reception of Lang Lang after the pianist, a 26-year-old pianist some of you might be familiar with. And I asked him, I had the opportunity to talk to him, and I said, when did you start playing the piano? He said, 3 years old. I said, how often did you practice? He said, well, the first 15 years I practiced 6 to 8 hours a day. Now that I'm performing, I only practice 3 hours a day. Which is really interesting because if you take 10,000 hours in 10 years, that's about 2.7 hours a day every day of the week for that 10-year period of time. Learning is how we become the best we can be. So if you have the aspiration in this room to become the best leader you can be thinking 2.7 hours a day every day for the next 10 years and beyond, because we're always learning new stuff. In fact, you might be practicing more hours a day now, but less hours a day in the future. The best leaders are the best learners. If we're going to start somewhere, where do we start? What's the foundation of leadership? What's our data tell us? Where does it all begin? Well, here's another question for you, a polling question. What do you look for in admiring a leader, someone whose direction you would willingly follow? So trust is one thing. What else do you want from a leader? Someone whose direction you would willingly follow. Vision, values.
Altruism.
Sorry, say again?
Altruism.
Altruism. Anything? Competence, the ability, skill and ability. Empathy. Well, we were able to gather data by asking questions like this. We came up with about 150 different attributes. We reduced them to 20, and then within those 20 there are synonyms for each of these words, and we gave it out to people early on in our research. Now we've gathered hundreds of thousands of responses to this, which we keep updated, 2,000 for every period of time. It's a rolling average. And if you look at this list, some of the words you said are up here, others are are synonyms for these words. Which 7, we asked people, would you most want from a leader, someone whose direction you would willingly follow? What do you think is going to come out on top as like number 1 on this list? Honest. What else do you think is going to come out on top? Intelligence going to come out near the top, yeah? Dependability. Caring. Inspiring. Well, we could go down the whole list. Everyone does get some votes. But what's the most significant? Here's the list. Now, why don't you with me go down this list and just say out loud the ones that get like 51% or more out loud. What's the first one on the list in alphabetical order? Competent with 68%. The next one? Forward-looking with 71%. The next one? Honest with 89%. The next one? Inspiring with 69%. Now there's one that was mentioned that does get 48% of the vote, intelligent. And in fact, more recently, if I were to take probably the last year, my guess is this could very well be over 50%. It's creeping up. It's the one that has increased the most over the last couple of years we've been doing the survey. So maybe next year when we publish this data, it might be over 50%. I don't know whether in the past we were looking for dumb leaders, but there's some evidence for that. But, you know, now we're looking for intelligent leaders. And clearly, my guess is if I were to do this just within Google, my sense is it would probably be over 50% because of the high valuing of that quality in leaders in this culture. And a couple of others round out the top 7 since we asked people to name 7 fair-minded and straightforward. Now, this is a useful and interesting list, but what's it all add up to? Well, if you take a look at the left-hand side, which are those... Yes, question?
Yeah, did the research distinguish between sort of admired leaders and effective leaders? Kind of like somebody says they want in, X, Y, and Z in a significant other, but it turns out what really works for them is A, B, and C?
Right, let me repeat the question for those who might not have heard. Does this what people admire, does it translate into effective leaders? The answer is twofold. One, the first step was to ask people what they look for. The second step was then to see, does this correlate with with effectiveness? I'll give you the answer to that in a moment, but the short answer is yes. I'll give you a longer answer to it, but the short answer is yes. If people are perceived to be higher on these dimensions, it does translate into more effective than people who score low. But there's a gap. For example, you take the number 1, honest. If you just ask people how honest, say, are business leaders, and you were to do a poll, and do a poll of employees, and ask the general question, not in your organization, but in general, how honest are business leaders? What do you think, what percentage would be rated as highly honest? What'd you guess? 5%, 20%? It's about 38%. For politicians, it's about 16%. Now, whether that's real or perception needs to be explored, but here's a way of thinking about that. If only about 1/3 of business leaders are honest, what that means is look to your left, look to your right, and decide which 2 of you are not honest. So our perception of people's honesty may not be the same as their actual, how honest they are, number 1, and number 2, it may or may not correlate with effectiveness. And the good news for us is, yes, it does translate into effectiveness the more honest you are. And this crosses cultures, by the way. This is a global phenomenon, not just a U.S. phenomenon or a North American or European phenomenon. To all across the globe, someone who's more honest is more effective. Does that respond to your question? Yeah. So these are the ones people most look for. But now look at what this list on the left-hand side. Trustworthiness, expertise, and dynamism are what researchers call source credibility, the believability of a source of information. So let's say you're speaking to a group of people, and they're listening to you. Now, you would hope that they are listening to the facts in your presentation, the stories that you're telling, the information you're providing, but in fact, every one of us, when we're listening to somebody speak, have a filter in our heads, a credibility filter. We assess whether this person is believable or not. And if we don't perceive that that person is believable, we won't pay attention to what they are saying. Somebody else can say exactly the same words, but if we think they are more believable than this other person, we're likely to believe that individual, but not the other individual. We are all biased, in other words. Credibility is the foundation of leadership, because if you look at those three words highlighted, you'll see at least what Barry and I saw and what other researchers in communications research on source credibility see, and that is there's a strong connection between honest and trustworthiness, expertise and competence, and dynamism and inspiring. And then there's one on there which is not on the list of credibility, which we'll be getting to in a moment, which is what? Forward-looking. Forward-looking is the one attribute which is different. The first message then is credibility is the foundation of leadership. If you don't believe in the messenger, you won't believe the message. The first task of any leader then is to establish their personal credibility with an audience before they should expect that that audience will believe them. And that is based upon perceived trustworthiness, expertise, and dynamism, honesty, competence, and being dynamic, upbeat, and inspiring. Now, before I go on and talk about the next attribute, the next key message, anyone have a comment, question, concern, emotional outbursts? It makes sense, right, that credibility would be the foundation of leadership. We're not going to follow somebody in whom we don't believe. But it's not enough. What drives commitment? So if credibility is the foundation of leadership, how are we going to get people committed? What drives commitment? Why should we follow somebody? One of the first questions we want to know is, then, what is credibility behaviorally? How do you know it when you see it? Before I'm going to commit myself, I understand that credibility is the foundation and I have to believe in the person. So what's the first step as a leader I should take in order to be credible with an audience? What is credibility behaviorally? How do you know it when you see it?
You do whatever you want.
You do
whatever you
do what you say something and then you implement that.
Body language?
Body language, okay. There's a certain body language that goes with it. What else?
Track record.
The track record. Somebody has a track record, so you look at what they say and then you look at what they've done in the past and you say, oh yeah, they've followed through, they've met their commitments, they've done what they say. Anybody else? Practice what you preach, put your money where your mouth is, walk the talk. Or do what you say you will do. D-W-I-S-Y-W-D, dwizzywid for short. I could see the Google logo as dwizzywid in sort of Google colors. Do what you say you will do. That has a strong implication for leaders. Whenever we ask the question, what's credibility behavior? This is the answer we got. Do what you say you will do, practice what you preach, put your money where your mouth is. So as leaders then, it is about track record. It is when I say something, people look at the evidence, which is my behavior, what I did, and they say this person is credible or not credible. That implies, first of all, that the first thing as leaders we need to do is be clear about what we're going to say. When we were talking with Elaine Fortier was at one of many startups. Some of you might have also been a part of similar ones that is no longer around, got bought up by somebody else. But when she was there, we were talking about the turmoil they were going through, not unlike times like this. Some downsizing was going on, technology bubble had burst, the churn had stopped, the churn was going on, people were leaving and going various places, and so she was kind of dazed and confused like a lot of folks during this time. And she finally said, I finally realized that no magic was going to happen. What I had to do was figure out for myself, what's my framework for living? Now, I don't know what your answer would be. I know what her answer is. I don't know what your answer would be, but the first job of a leader is to figure out their framework for living, is to be able to answer this question. What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What do you care about? What do you value? And here's why it's important. Here's a matrix. Made it simple, a 2x2, low to high on 2 dimensions. Clear about the organization's values, that would be, in this case, Google's, and clear about my values. Now, where do you think the highest level of commitment is going to be based upon 4 possibilities? Low clarity about personal values, but high clarity about the organization's values. Low clarity of personal, low clarity of organizational. High clarity of personal values, but low clarity about the organizations. Or high clarity about both. Where's the highest level of commitment to the organization's goals and objectives going to be?
It's always the upper right.
Upper right-hand corner. It's the one that most of us would guess, and gets that is in fact the result on a scale of 1 to 7, 6.26. That's what we found in our research. Where's the lowest level of commitment going to be? Low, low, that would be our guess, but in fact it's the upper left-hand corner. Know what the organization stands for, not very clear about my own values. In fact, it's not, however, that different from the bottom left-hand corner, 4.9. Not clear about either one. Where's the second highest level of commitment then? Highly clear about my own, but not so clear about the organization's. Now this is really intriguing. How can somebody be committed to an organization's goals and objectives without knowing its values and beliefs, but really knowing their own?
They're able to create the environment that works with their values around them.
So by being clear about my own, I can create the kind of environment that I need to be responsive to my values and beliefs. And what happens if they're not compatible with the organizations? What am I likely to do? I'm likely to leave. So probably, more than likely, we got this result because those people were highly clear about their own values, but discovered somehow that the organization's values weren't a good fit, had already left before they responded to the survey. So that's where we got the result. So the next step in leading then, after being clear that credibility is the foundation, is that I need to understand fully what my values and beliefs are, and then take a look at the fit with the organization, because the highest level of commitment does come when we are both aligned with each other. 6.26 is statistically significantly different than 6.12 and all the other numbers. Now I have to point out one other thing. 4.87 and 4.9 are not necessarily low levels of commitment. That's about a B- level of commitment. But what are we looking for inside organizations these days? A B- level of commitment or an A+ level of commitment? Given how many hours you work, I would guess that it's probably an A+ level of commitment. And so it's really important that as leaders in organizations, whenever we're trying to get a group of people to move with us in a particular direction and mobilize their action, that we spend some time making sure that we are clear about our personal values and see the fit. I had lunch downstairs in one of your lovely cafes. And right there over the food line, some of you stopped to read this, is the values of the cafe. You see that? Anybody ever stopped to read that? You know that? Those people spent some time looking at what they stood for and believed in, and were the kind of food they were going to make, and also that it fit with the people who work here and the kind of culture that we want to create within this organization. They spent the time to do that. That creates a higher level of commitment. So that's the first step as a leader we need to take. What practice has the most positive impact, however? So we're clear now about our values. What's the practice that has the highest level of impact on people's performance? Other people's performance, not just yours as a leader, but other people's performance. Anybody want to take a guess? I've already given you a hint. So I'm clear about what I say.
Matching the values.
Matching the values with the behavior. The most important behavior of any leader is whether or not they follow through on what they say they're going to do. whether they keep their commitments, put their money where their mouth is, practice what they preach. Barbara Goretzky at Northrop Grumman put it to us this way: what's the evidence that we are living our values and making decisions that are consistent with our values? What's the evidence? And as constituents, we look at leaders' behavior as the evidence. So as leaders in whatever venue we might be leading, with whatever group we might be leading, the most important thing that our constituents are going to be looking at, and the thing that will have the most impact on their performance, is whether I do what I say I will do. We call it model the way, has the most impact on people's performance. Michelle Goins also reminded us of something, however. Michelle Goins is at HP, Chief Information Officer. She said, leadership opportunities are presented to everyone. What makes the difference between being an effective leader or not is how you respond in the moment. Leadership is in the moment. It's not just about grand plans. It's not just about strategy. It's about what you do every day, and does what you do every day send a signal to other people that you are consistent with your values and beliefs. And this is a real challenge for most of us in the information environment. How long does an information worker work before that person gets interrupted? Average amount of time. Somebody works before an interruption. 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 5 seconds to be precise. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. That means you have somebody's attention for about 3 minutes and 5 seconds if you're trying to influence them. And so as leaders, we need to think about not just grand plans, grand strategies, statements of values, but how in 3 minutes and 5 seconds am I going to influence someone's behavior in a positive direction by setting a good example. Thinking in small steps, small increments, what am I going to do? What makes the most, what most differentiates leaders? I told you the behavior that has the most impact, but what's the behavior that is most differentiates leaders from other credible people like individual contributors? I've also given you a hint on this one. Remember that list of 4 attributes that came out on top? One of them was forward-looking. Forward-looking most differentiates leaders from other credible people. Jim, where do you see yourself in 10 minutes? Not exactly a person being forward-looking. I picked this slide, by the way, because not only did I think the message is funny, but the guy kind of looks like me, doesn't he? Same name, so why not? Where are you going to be in 10 minutes? Not exactly about being forward-looking. Yeah, vision trumps everything when it comes to leadership. Vision trumps everything when it comes to differentiating leaders from other credible people. It is about inspiring a shared vision that is the most important differentiator between leaders and other credible people. So yes, I have to follow through and do what I say I will do, but because I'm in a leadership role, I also need to be clear about where we're headed, the direction in which we're going, what vision I see. So I come up with a great idea, and I want to present it to a group of people and mobilize their action. I have to be able to present that idea in such a way that other people can see themselves in the picture and want to get aligned with it. On average, 71%, as you saw, of individuals want leaders who are forward-looking, have a vision of the future, and at senior executive levels, the percentage is 88% of senior executives want leaders with an ability to inspire a shared vision, see across the horizon of time. And over all the years we've been collecting data, however, this is the one that's the most difficult. So we have a challenge around inspiring a shared vision. One is that it's the most important differentiator, and as leaders we have to develop that capability. But over the 25 years we've been collecting quantitative data on this, it is the one that continues to challenge leaders the most. It's the one in which we are the least skilled. And over 25 years we haven't seen much movement in which means we haven't done a very good job over the last 25 years of developing this capacity either. It is a real shortcoming on the part of many leaders and also in leadership development. And it's an area of attention, an area that requires our attention. But if we look a little bit more into our data and look at the 3 items which score 3 of the 4 lowest scoring items in our research, I think we get a clue as to why this is so difficult. Let's take a look at those 3 items. I show others how their long-term interests can be realized by enlisting in a common vision. I appeal to others to share an exciting dream of the future, and I describe a compelling image of what our future could be like. So you look at those 3 items. Do you see anything in common across those items that might give you a clue as to what makes this so difficult and what we need to work on? What's the data tell you?
You have to know your own vision before you can help others realize theirs.
So one, you have to know your own vision before you can help others realize theirs.
You're painting things for others.
You have to paint a picture for others. You have to make it compelling for others.
It's all about them.
It's about them. It's all about them and their long-term interests. It's not enough to have a great idea. It's not enough to see the future. What's more important when it comes to leadership is the ability to communicate that in such a way that others can see themselves in the picture. It's kind of like this Snoopy cartoon. Here we have Snoopy, and he's obviously the leader because he's got his picture on the flag. Right. Okay, troops, gather round. Well, who is it? It's me. I'm the leader, so I get my picture on the flag. Well, he continues to say, well, just think how it will inspire you as we march along. Woodstock speaks up, thinks maybe he's got a question or two, and so he says, well, all right, does anyone have a better idea? I think this says it all. We are more likely to align ourselves with a leader who's able to show us how we fit in the picture. We can carry our own flag while at the same time the leader carries theirs. A leader has a vision of the future, but a leader has to be able to articulate that vision in such a way that other people can see themselves as part of the picture. Here's another way to get an image of this. Let's pretend that I bring around a jigsaw puzzle which has 1,000 pieces, and I give each of you a few pieces, and I say, put the puzzle together. What's the first thing you want to know or see? You want to see the picture on the box top, right? You want to see what the end result will look like? Each one of us has pieces of a puzzle called Google. We each have pieces. And we're being asked to fit those pieces together in such a way that it makes a whole. Every leader has the challenge of showing people the picture on the box top so that they can put those pieces in place in such a way that everybody says, oh yeah, now I understand where my piece fits in the whole thing. Now I can more efficiently and effectively make a contribution. Now I can play a meaningful role in this. So every leader must be able to articulate a vision of the future in such a way that other people see themselves in it. What's the, how positive do we need to be? What is going to most fully engage people? Well, perhaps this hint from Erwin Fetterman. Erwin came to talk to our MBA students at Santa Clara University. Erwin's a former CEO of a high-tech company, went and became a partner in a venture capital firm, and made this comment. He says, I contend, however, that all of the things being equal, we work harder and more effectively for people we like, and we will like them in direct proportion to how they make us feel. So yes, leadership is about ideas, it's about vision, it's about values, but it's also about relationships. I'm sure all of you have heard the phrase, I don't care if they like me, I just want them to respect me. Ever heard this phrase? I imagine many of you have, right? Well, was this a binary question? You can either like somebody or respect them, that you can't have both? And in fact, when it comes to leadership, it's required that we have both. Those leaders who are well-liked are more effective than those leaders who are not well-liked. So as contrary as this might sound to our common wisdom, actually leaders should want to be liked. Not in the sycophantish popularity contest kind of way, but liked in terms of people feeling a positive relationship to that person and saying, I want to follow that individual in that direction. Not only do I respect that person for their competence and their ability, but I also like them as a person. and would want to spend a lot of time with that individual. I may not be the most knowledgeable person, Joyce Clifford told us, but I do know how to get people to think well about themselves. That's really how we fully engage other people, getting them to think well about themselves as a result of our interactions with them. In research that was done by a couple of colleagues, Wasada and Heafy, they found that top-performing teams had members who were more positive, asked more questions, focused more on others, and were more connected than low or moderate performing teams. It is about the relationships. It is about how people interact with each other. So if 1 is the amount of negative affect we feel in interaction with somebody else, what's the positive number need to be in order for us to feel fully engaged? What would you guess? 3, 5? Well, according to some research, it's 3 to 1, and according to others, it's 5.6 to 1. Somewhere between 3 and 5. So if I'm interacting with another person as a leader, and over a day's time, the sense when the person leaves at the end of the day that there have been 3 to 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction, that person is more likely to be fully engaged than someone who says it's only 2 to 1 or 1 to 1 or a negative relationship. We do have to be more positive in our interaction with people than negative interaction with people for them to feel fully engaged. Now, where do we start all this? Where do we begin to get better? Sergei Nikiforov, again, another individual we interviewed as part of our ongoing data collection, told us that he posed this question to himself: where do I start becoming a leader? And he said, I thought about all these grand things, all of the strategies, all of the vision, values, messages that I'm getting, but I realized that I found that every day I could do a number of small things. I could do little things that made a difference. I could have coached someone better. I could have listened better. I could have been more positive towards people. I could have said thank you more often, and the list went on. Each and every one of us in this room, my guess is, can coach someone better, be more positive towards people, listen more, and say thank you more often on a regular basis. And those micro behaviors are the ones that on a regular basis are going to have a more positive impact than the negative ones. Now, I'm going to take about 10 minutes worth of questions, and in 3 minutes to the hour, I'll tell you the secret to success in life. But if you leave now, you won't hear that message. So let me just pause, ask a few questions of me, and then I'll bring it to a close. So yes, please.
When you're talking about negative interactions, what happens if the person that is receiving a negative interaction that it's warranted? Or like, can you clarify what you mean? Because
sure.
Let's say like you're wrong, that you did mess up a project, and your manager's correcting you that you shouldn't have done that, or something like that. I mean, that sometimes it's warranted, that negative interaction. But so can you clarify?
Yeah. So let me clarify that. So what is a positive interaction? What's a negative interaction? And what if somebody in fact needs correcting? So my response to the last part of the comment is, it's not 3 to 0. It's 3 to 1 or 5 to 1. So yes, we need to have those corrective behaviors. Sometimes people behave in ways that aren't appropriate and need to be told what the appropriate behavior is. Sometimes people make errors and they make mistakes, and those mistakes need to be corrected. So that's the one part. So let's say those happen 3 times in a day, and you do 3 of those with one individual. That means 9 if it's going to be the appropriate ratio. Now, on an hourly basis, I don't think you want to keep count, but on a daily basis, it's probably a good idea. And by the way, you can't make it up all at once, like, I wasn't positive towards that person today, so I'm going to run back in the last 5 minutes and make it all up at one time. It doesn't quite work that way. Oh, by the way, in a personal relationship, let's say some of you in a relationship with a significant other, like a marriage maybe, what's the ratio need to be? 10 to 1? Well, it's 5 to 1. It's at least 5 to 1 in a marriage. And the people who did this research, Goffman and others who've done this kind of research, they actually videotape couples in an interaction over a difficult subject like money, say. and they talk about money, and then they videotape. If the ratio is not 5 to 1, there's a 95% probability that couple will separate.
Wow.
Now some of you are doing a serious review at this moment of your, so let me just give an example, if I could, of the positive negative. So one, it's a matter of balance. And really, positive negative is not up to you, it's up to the other person. So as a leader, I have to have really good antenna as to what other people respond to positively and negatively. Let me just say one brief story. Steve Farber used to work for me, and Steve Farber came back very excited after engagement, and he came and he was really excited about his engagement, and he was talking to me about it, and I was interacting with him, and I said something about the trip, and he said, "Oh man, it's just really a downer, it's really a bummer, and it was really an awful trip." And I said, "Oh, Steve, let me tell you about mine." And after those words came out of my mouth, and I noticed that all the energy drain out of him, I realized that I was having a negative impact on him, not because I really didn't care about Steve, but at that moment I switched the conversation from what was important to him to what was important to me. "Oh, let me tell you about my problem, Steve. What's yours?" "No, my problem's better than your problem." That's a negative to that person. And as a leader, I need to be really highly attuned to those kind of interactions. So I hope that's at least an example of in response to your question. Yeah.
I was going to say, just to clarify that, in your case, it sounds like if I know I screwed up and I'm looking for I'm looking for critique. So it might think it's like, okay, what did I do wrong? But for me, I take that as a positive.
Yeah.
So in the case of that 3 to 1, that kind of counts on the positive side. I would think.
Sure. Somebody might come to you and say, "I really need your help. I'm not feeling good about how I've been performing, and I need some help from you." On the other hand, if you go up to the other person and your first immediate reaction is, "You're screwing up here, let me help you," that could be very well a negative. And so, again, we have to be finely attuned to the nature of the interaction.
And on the other side of the coin, don't the positives have to be authentic? You can't just kind of make up stuff.
Yeah. What a great job, whatever it was, whoever you are. Yeah, sort of doesn't quite work. It's not genuine. It has to come across as genuine. Genuineness obviously works into the equation. So part of that honesty, genuineness, integrity piece. Yes, sir.
What do you think of the sort of Machiavellian perspective of it's better to be feared than loved? I mean, what does the data say on the efficacy of sort of fear tactics in personal relationships?
The efficacy of fear tactics in relationship. What our evidence says is that they flat out don't work. That over time, those leaders who are feared create an environment which is hostile, create an environment which is toxic, and have very high turnover. And it may work in a very short period of time, but over a longer term time perspective, that person does more damage to the organization than help to the organization. And so anyone who instills fear in other people is not going to, over the long period of time, make an effective leader.
Also, keeping in mind Machiavelli, he's talking about literally slaughtering your enemies.
Yeah. So, and a different time, a different place. But in today's workplace, and I would imagine here at Google in particular, if people create that kind of toxic environment, it's just culturally unacceptable. Yes?
Just curious as which characteristics of great leaders do you think are trainable versus inherent, and particularly the ones where it showed that we're both really important and leaders are lacking? It seems like that's the kind of thing that we want to train our leaders to do.
Couple of responses. I always make, and I think it's important for leaders to always make the assumption that you can learn something versus you can't learn something. If you take the population here in this organization, for the most part, you've selected very well for people who are highly competent, right? And my belief is that most of you believe that everyone here has high potential for performance, to perform their job, what they were selected for. And that the question of whether it was innate and inborn or not, you've done a great job of selecting people. So as a leader, I need to start out with the assumption that people have the potential to do a great job. Why? because simply assuming that somebody can't will change their behavior. Classic research been done for many years on the Pygmalion effect, which indicates that teachers who make the assumption that a student is not as smart as somebody sitting next to them at the next desk over will make the assumption that the person who is the smart one, identified as the smart one, will outperform the other person. But in fact, the people were randomly assigned by the researchers to those categories, and it had no relationship whatsoever to whether they were smart or not. But those people indeed who they were told were smart outperformed those people who they were told were not as smart. The same thing is true about solving a math problem. If I give you a math problem and I give one group an instruction that says the math is an innate ability and you either have it or you don't, and then I tell the other group this is a math problem, but it's the kind of thing that if you work at it over time you can learn it, those individuals who are given the message that they can learn over time perform better than those people who are told it's inherent and it's innate and their performance declines, but the group was randomly assigned to those roles. The only difference was the instruction that they were given. So as a leader, we always need to give the positive instruction that we assume that people can do something. Now, what aspects of this are innate or not? What's born or not born? Well, I've never met a leader who was not born. We're all born. So it's really what we do with what we have before we die that makes the difference. And if people want to become better leaders, and that is the criteria, want to be better leaders, there aren't any of the behaviors I mentioned that cannot be learned. At a higher level than they currently have them, because they are skill-based. Now, will I get as good as somebody who's been at it for 10 years and practicing 3 hours a day for 10 years? Not if I'm just starting out. Not in the first 5 years. But over a period of time, if I do that same level of practice, the probability is that I will get to a higher level than I am. Maybe not as high as somebody who's been doing it longer because they got a head start on me. But I will be able to improve my performance in each and every one of these categories. And we've got research. If you want to go to our website, leadershipchallenge.com, look under the research tab, you'll find 350 doctoral dissertations that have tested this and other assumptions. I'm near my closing, so I would love to stay with you and take more questions. So, if anyone wants to stick around for a few minutes and ask a few more. But I promised you I'd tell you the secret to success in life and knowing that credibility is doing what you say you will do. I will tell you that secret. We had a lot of opportunity to interview a lot of people, and at the end of the interviews we typically ask, so what recommendations would you have for other people, whether it's at Santa Clara University, whether it's at Google, whether it's at this organization or that organization? What would you tell people they need to do to become the best leader they can be? Major General John Stanford, deceased now, but at the time he was Military Traffic Management Command for the U.S. Army, and then retired and became Fulton County's administrator. That's Atlanta, the county in which Atlanta is located. And then he became superintendent of schools for Seattle Unified School District, obviously someone with a very distinguished public service career. Gave us the best answer to that question. He said, whenever anyone asks me that question, how do I develop leaders for the future? I tell them I have the secret to success in life. Now I'm taking notes, but I'm really paying attention. He says, the secret to success is stay in love. Staying in love gives you the fire to really ignite other people, to see inside other people, to have a greater desire to get things done than other people. A person who is not in love doesn't really feel the kind of excitement that helps him to get ahead and to lead others and to achieve. I don't know any other fire, any other thing in life that is more positive and exhilarating a feeling than love is. I did not expect to hear that from a major general in the U.S. Army. And yet, when I thought about what he had to say and what all the other people that we interviewed, those people who just were passionate and excited about leading other people. What was in common about them was that to them, leadership was not an affair of the head. Leadership was an affair of the heart. So my last bit of advice would be to love them and lead them. All right, thank you all very much. Thanks, Evan, for the opportunity to be here. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Jim can probably stay up here for a couple minutes if you have questions. And I really need to thank Alana Weiss from our team, who did a lot to change the entire schedule today because of Eric's all hand. So thanks. Thank you all for coming.